Good evening, everyone. Erev Tov. Bonsoir à tous. Welcome to this webinar about cultural heritage in video games. My name is Jean-Jacques Pierrat, Director of the French Institute of Israel and Counselor for Cooperation and Cultural Affairs at the French Embassy. As part of Novembre Numerique, which showcases French digital talents and promotes international collaboration with experts from all over the world, and in association with Gameis or Gameis, the Digital Games Industry Association in Israel, we are proud to host today a discussion on preserving cultural heritage through video games. In a context of extremely fast development within cities, digital is emerging as a new urban planning tool to create smart cities, but also to preserve urban heritage. The urban landscape is the background of many video games, such as Paris and Jerusalem in Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed, but it's also the crossroad of representation of history and reconstructions of endangered cities by conserving them through 3D models. Video games and VR are a symbolic bridge between past and future. How to protect the past using innovative technologies. How to produce digital twins. How to combine 3D scanning with the use of drones. What are the benefits of these technologies in the COVID pandemic? To address this topic, we are delighted to welcome Déborah Papiernik, Senior Vice President at Ubisoft, Nimrod Shanit, Founder and Executive Director of Holy City VR, and Yves Ubelman, President and Founder of Iconem. Thank you for your participation. Each of you in your field of expertise contributes to creating transcultural, transtemporal, and transdisciplinary links to better understand humanity. Finally, many thanks to my team and especially Ansole and Leah for tremendous work in organizing this event with our partner Gameis. Thank you also to Gameis. I will now hand over to Guy Bendorf from Gameis for a few introduction words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being part of that. Thank you, Jean-Jacques. Thank you, the entire Institut Français d'Israël. Erev Tov and bonsoir, everyone. My French and English and Israeli accent are mixing up. I'm very, very pleased to have this event happening. This is a second year that we're doing event with Institut Français, and we're happy that culture is prevailing over COVID, and we're able to continue and do these events together, whatever the situation is. Online allows us actually, I think, to reach more people and enjoy wonderful panel with international panel without the hassle of actually flying and staying. And hopefully by next year, we will be able to do things together face to face. For us, this type of panel is extremely interesting because it goes beyond just games. This is a cutting edge set of tools and a cultural element that takes a lot of technologies that may started with in games into a much broader aspect. And I can't wait to hear the panel talk about that. So with that, again, I want to say thank you very much for the entire team of the Institut Français. The entire team at Gameis, Mary being the leading person for this event, and of course for the esteemed panel that I'm very excited to hear from. So let's have a great panel today. Can't wait.
So I think it's my turn to talk.
Yves, your turn, yes.
Yes, okay. So bonsoir à tous. I'm Yves Ubelman, and I'm here with Etienne Tellier from my team. And so I'm not from the field of video game. I'm architect by training, but I will explain how we do with my team digital twins of heritage sites and how we can connect with the world of video games. So we can share maybe our screen just to illustrate a little bit our technology. So since 10 years now, we use drones and we take picture. So I don't know if it's clear, if everyone can see the screen, but we use drones in order to, voilà, here, in order to take a lot of picture of sites. Is, for example, in Albania, and the drone is doing like a pattern over the site, taking picture and picture, and then after, in the second phase, we use this algorithm that enables us to recreate from the 2D picture taken by the drone a 3D model of whole sites. So it's interesting because we can get a very photorealistic copy of the site. So this, for example, it's not a footage taken on the field, it's a 3D model. And it's interesting because we can represent an archaeological place, not at the scale of the landscape, but also this is, for example, a monastery taken in Messainak in Afghanistan. And it is interesting because we can see, you know, the architecture, but also the detail of the 3D, the decoration. And for archaeologists, it's very interesting to have that. So it's what you can see here is what we call a point cloud. So there is billions of points that recreate a whole landscape, a whole environment, and you can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and see from the mountain to the detail of archaeological pieces. You can see all the detail of the site. So it's really interesting to have this data because, for example, in this site, Messainak is south of Kabul. You know, it's difficult to go because there is a Taliban village all around, and there is some rockets who on the site, so it's very dangerous. But there is an international community who can still work on this site thanks to this 3D representation. And it's a real database, scientific database that can be shared all over the world, even if the site is not really accessible. And today, sadly, it's not possible anymore to go there. So digital twins is really important because it allows, you know, to share a lot of detail on the element of remote sites. This is another example. This is Palmyra in Syria that was destroyed by Islamic State, and this is the main temple. So when so we went to the site to take the picture and to reconstruct, you know, the temple with drones, but we arrived too late in this case because the temple was already destroyed. So the idea is with the 3D, we can also go back in time by using old picture, archive picture. We are able, you know, to reconstruct the temple as it was before. So what you can see here is the combining of many old pictures from 1930s that able to rebuild in 3D a temple that you cannot see anymore on the field. So it's really important, you know, because we can recreate a landscape from old archive. And here you can see, this is the site as it is today. So you can see in the middle, it's the temple destroyed, but we can overlap, you know, different time in the same 3D model. And it's so interesting for the archaeologists because they can compare, you know, the site and see the evolution of the site and the dynamic of the conservation. We can go even further. Here it's an arch in Palmyra, and we can rebuild the arch by recreate every stone of the arch. So the stone are on the ground. And by scanning all the stone, we can rebuild it in 3D with AI and algorithms that can combine, you know, the stone all together. So it's really a new tools for architects and archaeologists to have more a precise idea of the archaeology and architecture. And it's a good help to have a better understanding of what's happening on the field. So it's interesting because with drones, we can take thousands of pictures and algorithm can match all the pictures together, and it's working very well even in very large areas like cities. This is another example of a site. So you understood that we are working a lot in country at risk, in country in conflict. Our goal is to keep the memory of these sites. And this is an example in Mosul. So you can see the whole city just after the bombing, and every buildings can be represented in 3D. And this work, we did it for UNESCO. And the idea is to make a general assessment at the size of the city to see how many building was destroyed, how many building was still it was still possible to restore, and how we will keep, you know, the identity, the historical identity of the city for the future. So this technology is also a very interesting help to draw, you know, the future of this heritage and to be, you know, able to keep it for the future generation, not only in digital format, but also help, you know, specialists to restore in a better way, you know, this heritage, even physically. So it's really changing, you know, the methodology of the specialists on the field, because by recreating, you know, in a very accurate way these cities and these landscapes, but we're able to have a better idea of what we can do really on the field. So our activities is mainly focused on a country in conflict. So it's interesting to use a drone because it's very fast. So in few days, we are able to take, you know, picture in an entire sites like a cities, and so we are able to work in any kind of context. And today we are very active in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Libya, or in Yemen as well, engaged to keep, you know, these fragile memories and to keep it for the future. So I think we can pass to the second.
Hello. ערב טוב, אני דבורה. Hello, I'm Déborah Papiernik. I'm working at Ubisoft. I'm in charge of the new business department. The aim of this department is to bring into play Ubisoft's expertise and our brands to break new grounds with different industries and to reach wider audiences than just our games. And I would like to start with talking about Assassin's Creed and how Assassin's Creed is making history everybody's playground. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we work when we develop a game like Assassin's Creed. So Assassin's Creed was, So Assassin's Creed was born in 2007, and the idea is an action-adventure game that explores different times in history. The first game was set during the Third Crusade, was actually Jerusalem in the game. We also explored the Italian Renaissance, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Golden Age of piracy, and more recently, Egypt or Greece. And last week, we just released a game about the Vikings. Now, how we work when we develop those games is we work a lot before we develop the game. When we develop a game, it takes about 4 years. Small team at the beginning, but it can go up to like 800 people worldwide working together to create a game. And there's a team that's extremely important within Ubisoft. It's the research team. So what they do is they study and learn. So they read a lot of books. They go to libraries everywhere in the world because they don't just find everything on the internet. So they really study to understand very well the cultural period that we want to use to bring into play to do the game and to feed the actual development team. Then they talk a lot with experts. Academics, of course, researchers, but also community experts. For example, if we work with, when we did the American Revolution, we had to work with community experts, with Native Americans, because there are some things that you don't always see on books on the internet. It's important to talk to the people to really understand and to make sure that you don't, that you represent them well. We also talk a lot with weapon experts because Assassin's Creed is a game that includes a lot of fighting. And we have weapon experts for every kinds of periods. For example, the one that you see here on the screen is a weapon expert from the American Revolution. And of course, we work with history fans. And these guys who reproduce battles in like costumes and everything, they go on the field. These guys, they're often as proficient on the subjects as academics because they're so passionate and they're extremely interesting for us to understand the ambience and to recreate living worlds. We also recreate history architecture as well. So lots of buildings. Some of them are kind of easy because there are pictures or there are paintings or some of them actually sometimes still exist. So it's possible. For others, we also get inspiration. For example, we wanted to represent monuments in Boston in the US, and the place had changed so much that we got inspiration from the Netherlands and from architecture in the Netherlands because we knew that it was the same kind of architecture. Here you see on the screen, you see pictures that were taken in-game. So the picture that the person is holding is a screenshot from Assassin's Creed Unity that covers the French Revolution. So he was playing the game, he took captures of his screen, he printed the screens, and then he's traveling Paris with the photo in his hand to compare it with the actual landscape of Paris. And it's just like fun to see that it really matches. What's really important in video games is how we recreate living worlds. It's not just the architecture, it's not just the landscape, it's also the people and the ambience, and create a place that you want to get connected to. And for this, it's important to learn about people, how people were living there. So there's this huge work about sociology as well, like what the people were wearing, the different jobs that they had, and just the ambience in the street. And for that, we also look at how movies can have represented it, but we very often go one step further and really work with experts and do our own research on this. And the idea for us, sometimes there are situations where you don't really have anything, I'm sorry, the video here does not work. You don't really have like a lot of information to reproduce. So here you have statuettes from the Louvre, and I'm sorry, but on the screen, I think you can't see the video. What we did is we used these statuettes to create some scenes where these people are animated and actually making bread or brewing beer. And we can include these people in our game to represent just the way people were living in Egypt. Now, I've talked about how we recreate, and we try to be as accurate as possible, as close as possible to reality. And all we create is based on graphic work. It's not like Yves explained how they do photogrammetry. And in photogrammetry, what's great is like it's extremely precise. It's scientifically completely accurate. When we do games, we need the inspiration, but we often don't need that type of accuracy. What we want to do is create an ambience. And it's a little bit like the difference between a touristic picture and a painting of the same place. So the touristic picture is accurate, but the painting of the exact same place is kind of accurate, but there's more to it because there's drama. So when you want to represent the world, current world or history, you can have a choice and decide to go for a very precise scientific reconstruction or something that's a little bit more artistic, and you lose a little bit, of course, on the scientific aspect. So here's an example in Assassin's Creed Origin that happens in Egypt. During the Ptolemy. That's the kind of ambience you would have in the game. And the pyramids, for example, are actually very accurate, but we also decided to put them a little bit further up than they were in reality, so that when you're at the pyramids, you can see things from afar. So we take liberty sometimes. It's the same thing when we decided to represent Notre Dame in Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity is set during the French Revolution, so that's the end of the 18th century. But the Notre Dame that we know, the one with the huge spire that unfortunately disappeared last year, this one was only built 70 years later. But in the game, we decided to put the modern Notre Dame for several reasons. One is it had to be recognizable, and that's very important. We know that without the spire, Notre Dame is not as recognizable. Unfortunately, we realize that today. And also because in Assassin's Creed, the character is climbing all the time. He's climbing over the buildings. So it was also like the fantasy, if you're going to climb Notre Dame, well, you want to go as far as you want, as possible on the top. So that's why we needed the spire. So that's the kind of decision that we make when we develop our games in 3D. And as the editor-in-chief of Historia put it, Assassin's Creed is the gateway to history for millions of gamers worldwide. It doesn't mean that they're going to learn everything about history in our games, but because our games are engaging, because they're beautiful, because they're interesting, because they're having fun, because they're social, they want to spend time there. And without even realizing it, they're learning so much. And it gives them a taste to actually go further. And lots of people just discovered those historical periods through our games. Like, few people are interested in the Third Crusade, but because of Assassin's Creed, some people went one step further. Lots of people don't get a chance to travel here or there, and then they discover. In France, we don't really learn, for example, about the American Revolution, but because of the game, lots of people learned about the American Revolution. And this is so true that we also developed an educational mode out of Assassin's Creed. We had so many requests from teachers everywhere in the world who wanted to use Assassin's Creed in the classroom because we have a living representation of lost civilization and places. They wanted to use the game, but it's not really possible because the game is a mature rated game. It's for people over 18. So they were begging for like a tool that they could use. So the team decided to reuse the 3D world that we had created for Egypt, and the same thing again for Greece, and create a discovery tour with historians. So there are plenty, like there are about 7 hours of content in each, and it's guided tours that tell you about architecture, philosophy, society, and religion, everything about these places. So it tells a different story with the same content that Ubisoft has recreated, and it's now used in school. It's so much used in school that during the lockdown in April, there was this teacher who was supposed to take his class to Greece for a school trip. And because of the lockdown, he couldn't do anything. So he contacted Ubisoft to have the authorization to use the Discover Tour. And we gave free codes via Stadia, the streaming service by Google, so that the kids could play the Discovery Tour of Assassin's Creed Odyssey in Greece, and that was like part of the curriculum. It was mandatory. The teacher really asked them to play the game. So for us, it's really interesting to see that all the work that we do for fun, for entertainment, can also be used for education. And I think I'm done, if Nimrod wants to take on.
Thank you. Good evening, Erev Tov. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. I'll be representing a project that I started now 4 years ago. It's called The Holy City. I hope you can see my screen. So The Holy City, and just to give you a broader sense of who I am. So I started off as a filmmaker, mainly focusing on documentary films, and came across virtual reality back in 2015. And I really wanted to tell the story of my city because I find it to be unique and very different to any other city in the world. So The Holy City is an immersive extended reality experience, and it's also a multifaceted platform that transports participants to Jerusalem and provides access to the most sacred rituals in the holiest cities and the holiest sites, of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Jerusalem, the Holy City, carries a rich history, an undeniable spirituality, and an indescribable magnetism that now people can explore in virtual reality. And let me show you, just want to make sure this is playing with the video. With the audio, can you hear the audio? I just want to make sure the audio is switched on.
I can't hear.
You can't hear it, so let me just hopefully now.
Here we go. Yep. All good.
So the experience uses gamification, and I think that's the reason we're here, and also interactivity for the purpose of documentary storytelling. It's guiding the viewer through a maze of stories and sights. So we combined various techniques, both of photogrammetry that was already discussed, but also stereo 360 video filmmaking and video captures in volumetric sense of people. And we kind of went about in creating an experience which is for a single user. But just as Deborah explained earlier, once you kind of have the assets, you realize there's more to do. So we now have made it into an installation where multiple people can play in the same game, in a museum installation, but also as guided tours. So people can go through live guided tours of the various historical sites in groups of up to 20 people at the moment. Now we've created this first experience that traveled to a number of film festivals worldwide. It's an hour-long gameplay. If you go just a step at a time, for some people who are devout, Christians or Muslims or Jews, they might spend more time in their faith, in their historic sites. And just to explain in terms of what we did, I would like to show you just a short excerpt of gameplay.
Simandra, or Gotchnaks, were introduced when a 14th century Muslim edict forbade churches to ring bells. Please take a mallet and strike the wood to call the faithful to prayer.
So what you see here is a mix of photogrammetry. The church that you see here is the St. James Church, the St. James Cathedral. And within the church, after we captured it, we introduced a number of game elements. So this Simandra and this book are obviously game assets that we've added. Oops. So this is one example. The other example, and the idea of introducing those gamifications or those game elements was in order to create an experience where people not just travel to Jerusalem as a kind of a tour, or as tourists, or as people who just want to explore cities, but to be able to learn about what is it that in this city that people are so attracted to. So, or what's the magic of it. So we wanted to, my point in making this experience was to be able to present to people the fact that we have a lot of shared values between all three religions. So the idea was to make people kind of find whatever is makes us similar and not whatever makes us apart, and find those things such as the fact that we're all Abrahamic religions, in order to really attach people to the core essence of humanity. So this is just another example. Oops. So what you see here are various gameplays that we introduced. They're all about how to make the user more engaged in each location, so he doesn't roam about without any reason, if you like. So when he does, for example, visit the Holy Sepulchre, there's the essence of the feeling of the presence of being there and being able to interact with the tomb. In the Western Wall, there is the interaction of writing a note and placing a note inside the Western Wall. And in the Tower of David Museum, there is a more of a, in some way, a connection that one can form musically with the city. So you're able to play various musical instruments and kind of learn about the significance to people visiting Jerusalem. I wanted to present you also with the AR element that we had introduced, because while we created this experience from a museum, also that it's being installed in the Tower of David Museum in Jerusalem. And we realized very quickly that people, there's one person in the headset that really is enjoying himself because he can go through the experience, but the rest of the group are just watching him on a wide screen. So instead of that, we introduced the element of a tablet, a Microsoft Surface, that the rest of the group is also challenged, if you like, with the same challenges, and they depend on one another. So if it's only once the group that's using the AR tablet are playing the games and being successful, can the person in VR proceed with his game. So it's a tandem experience for four groups. The experience itself is a kind of the room itself is, I just want to give you, is kind of an experience where it's a small space. There's a groups of up to 6 people that kind of attend the space, and we design the space in a way that once you step in, it's not only that you just stepped into a 3,000 years old citadel of the Tower of David, but within it you kind of step back in history or within time and experience Jerusalem in a different way. So we are now in the process of making a sequel to the Holy City. The idea is to visit other sites in Jerusalem and also connect it to Istanbul, because a lot of the origins of Christianity can be found supposedly in this small town and small house that belonged to Mary in Istanbul. So we kind of connecting not only people to a specific site or to a unique location, but also to the possibility of opening portals from one place to the other and virtually in some way stepping into a holodeck and traveling to different locations. So as I said, we were very fortunate to have been presented in a number of festivals, and we've been awarded for our work, which has been very, not just something that's very humbling, but also it helped us kind of drive the experience further. We're generously supported, and this is, I think, a major part in the discussion is how do you end up making this? So the idea was to approach media funds and to get them to support this. And we're a team of creators, Muslim, Christian, and Jews, that we work together in this experience. And what I think was wonderful is to be able to, put aside all religions and all other matters and be able to express ourselves and find a way to gamify the experience for people worldwide. What I would like to say is that at the end of the talk, where the game is now available on Viveport and Steam, and I'll provide you with the link. So if anyone is interested, they can write to me. We've now linked to a number of NGOs. So we're contributing the income, if you like, from the sales to those NGOs to help support more bi-national or interfaith activities. So you're welcome to write, and I'll be happy to share that. There's a 50% discount, I think, that we can provide. So thank you very much, and happy to jump in later for further questions. Oops, sorry. Close this. I think we're back with you, Yves. Yep.
Yeah. The idea now is to explain how we can use from outside, this 3D data that are scientific data, and to turn it into an experiences, and how we work with Ubisoft also to recreate, this environment. So we started working at the beginning just with scientists like archaeologists and architects in order to create new methodology for the conservation of heritage. But very soon we were in contact with museum, and we were asked to create from this data, because it's photorealistic data, to recreate environment in exhibition and in museum. And so we started working with Le Grand Palais in Paris, for example, and then with Institut du Monde Arabe. And the idea is to use the point clouds, I mean this virtual landscape, and to recreate huge video mapping from these point clouds, and to have like wall rooms that can be huge, 300 square meter rooms, fully mapped by this kind of 3D landscape. And so the recent exhibition we did together with Ubisoft was visible at Institut du Monde Arabe. So the idea is to bring to the visitor here in Europe this kind of images of this place like Mosul, like Aleppo, like Palmyra, like Leptis Magna in Libya, and to bring this landscape to the visitors. And there is two goals. The first goal is to make accessible this kind of places. So you can see here there is a view of the exhibition itself. So you can see this large video mapping. In the left is Palmyra, in the right is Leptis Magna. It's a Roman site in Libya. So these landscapes, they are moving. So we are just diving in it, and we make a full experience of visit through these images. And the second goal is also to show to the people how rich are these places, even if they are threatened, even if they are at risk. We need to protect them. We need we are responsible of this heritage, and we have to act also for its preservation. And it was interesting to see, you know, the reaction of the people visiting the exhibition, because it makes, you know, real to the people, you know, this destruction of heritage, and it's raise awareness about this problem. So it's very important for us to use images in large format in order to be able, you know, to change the mind of the people, and to be sure that the people will be aware of these problems. And the idea, it was a partnership with Ubisoft, is to also recreate with headsets, you know, like a virtual visit inside sites like Mosul, like Aleppo, to really for the visitor to feel really the impression we have on the site. I was myself in all these different sites to take the picture, so I was able, you know, to talk about my impression, and we decided to recreate it thanks to the team of Ubisoft. So Deborah, you can explain what you did from this data.
Yeah, so the idea was we were actually talking to Iconem, and we love what they do, but photogrammetry is a little bit hard to use in video games, just because, as Yves explained, it's based on thousands of pictures. And so the 3D model that you have in the end is very, very heavy. And if you put a very heavy model in a video games engine, then all the processor is used just to show the landscape and the buildings, and you have no processing power left to have your character move or fight. So we use it just a little bit sometimes, but not much. And when Yves presented me this project of an exhibition with the Arab World Institute in Paris, I said, oh, okay, so here it's different, and maybe we can break new ground and use photogrammetry for a virtual reality experience. So we identified 6 different buildings or monuments or places that for which he had 3D models, and we decided to turn them into a virtual reality experience where you have an impression of actually being there. And there are some places there that are absolutely not accessible. For example, there's the tunnel in Mosul, of the tunnel of Nabi Yunus, that was an Assyrian temple. It's inaccessible. Or Leptis Magna, no one goes and travels to Libya on vacation these days. So these are places that are hard to access, and here we can put the people in the place. So what we did is we took the 3D model from photogrammetry and we added our expertise of video game. When you saw the images of photogrammetry, you can see that they're very still, they don't move, there's no life there, because the focus is just on the building, and the algorithm itself actually suppresses any life. If there's a bird that passes in the scene, the algorithm that's going to turn the pictures into a 3D model is going to cut all the movement. So the result is very precise scientifically, but it's not lively. And as I explained earlier, what we know how to do in games is bring life into a scene. So what we did is we took this model, we recreated the shadows, we put the sun, we worked on the textures to bring more colors as well. And we also added life, like birds or a cat, as you will see. So this is an example in Leptis Magna. And in the exhibition, at the end of the exhibition, you had 3 cabins with a VR headset with a place. You can't. Can you see the video? No, you can't. No. Okay. Well, sorry. So you can't see the video. You only have the music, or maybe. So okay. So I'll just cut the video and just explain. So voilà, here it is. Voilà. So here you can see the temple of Baal Shamin in Palmyra. And someone asked the question, can you recreate things from scratch, like from just sketches? This is exactly what was done here. We used sketches from an explorator in the 1930s, and there was a 3D model developed by the University of UNIL in Lausanne in Switzerland, and we reused this model to recreate the temple that was destroyed by Daesh. And we the way it works in the exhibition was that in a cabin of 3 meters by 3, one step in the museum felt exactly like one step in the souk of Aleppo or among the ruins. And oops, I think it works. You can't really see anything, sorry. It's the same thing in the church of Mosul. So you have the church Notre-Dame de l'Heure in Mosul, and there are birds passing by. So the birds bring life, and also they bring they force you to look above and to look at the beautiful arches above you. So it was extremely moving. It was playing on emotion. There was no gameplay, and it was funny because when my team was working on it, they immediately wanted to add elements of gameplay, but that was already 2 years ago, and VR is still new for people, and this exhibition was meant for a public that was maybe not ready to use a controller and everything. So we had to be very soft, and we decided to focus just on personal movement, like someone walking in the scene in the museum, just as if he was walking on the scene. And this way we could target younger kids, we could target older people who are sometimes a bit reluctant to using technology and game pads. We had a beautiful, beautiful example of a lady who was originally from Mosul. She was in her 90s, and she came with her 70-year-old daughter. And the older lady, she was in a wheelchair, and her daughter was like pushing her through the exhibition, the beautiful exhibition, and all the gigantic projections that Iconem had done. And at the end of the exhibition, she's with the wheelchair. She has the headset on, and her daughter is moving her in this space of 3 meters by 3, and she feels exactly as if she is in the souk of Aleppo or in the church in Mosul. And it was beautiful because with virtual reality like this, you can, even people who can't really go to these places, they can experiment. And there's this word that Nimrod used earlier, it's the sense of presence. Virtual reality gives you this sense of presence, and it's also a very good tool of empathy. And so the exhibition was very successful in Paris. It then traveled to Saudi Arabia, to Germany, and it's now in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Institute. You want to say, can I say a few words about Notre Dame? We have time, or do you want to switch to questions?
No, I think you have time, Deborah.
Okay, okay. So when, so in April, the video doesn't work again. Okay, so in April 19, Notre Dame, so there was this terrible fire of Notre Dame, and everybody in the world started posting videos, pictures, souvenirs of their trips to Paris and to Notre Dame. And the gamers worldwide, they pulled up their game, Assassin's Creed Unity, that was released in 2014. And that's a long time. 5 years in the video games industry is really a long time. So they pulled the game and they played the game, and they took captures of the game, and they posted videos of gameplay. We at Ubisoft were extremely surprised that they did it. We had no idea that for them it was so strong to see Notre Dame in the game and make the link with the fire. So we were so touched that we gave money for the reconstruction. We also gave the game for free for a week to people, for people to just have it at home. And the other thing we did is I asked my team to take the 3D model of Notre Dame that we had created in 2014 for the game. This model took about 5,000 hours of work. So the team in Montreal, it was just all handmade. Graphists who used they used all kinds of like sketches and pictures, and they came on site from Montreal to do their own pictures to really get a feel of the building, and they rebuilt Notre Dame in 3D in the game. So we took the 3D model, ported it to a virtual reality engine, and we created an experience where you have 10 different points of view. You're teleported automatically from one point of view to the other, inside, outside, and then you have a tour in a balloon on top of Notre Dame. And it's in 3 degrees of freedom, which means that just the same way we did it in the Age-Old Cities experience, you can actually walk there. So you can bend over the balcony, you can look behind a column, you actually walk there. So it's just as if you were there, and you can do it in Paris, and you can do it from where anywhere in the world. And you can actually do it at the Institut français since Monday as well. You can experiment it, and you can also download it from the virtual reality stores. It's a free experience, lasts about 4 minutes. We went as far as adding the music from the last recordings of Notre Dame. So even the music is really beautiful. We showed it last year at the European Day, Heritage Day at UNESCO. So if the video works, you'll see a few images from that. No, but the video is not moving, so that's okay. And it's gonna, well, and it's as soon as our new lockdown is finished, when the archaeological crypt of Notre Dame, that's just right in front of Notre Dame, opens again, people in Paris are going to be able to experiment the VR experience also just like a few meters away from Notre Dame within this museum, which is the archaeological crypt of Notre Dame. Voilà. That's it for me. Maybe I can answer one question that I saw on the chat about do you need authorizations and everything. When we do 3D, we don't need the place to be empty. because we go, we take our pictures, and then our graphics are working from the pictures or from the films that we're taking. It doesn't need to be empty because we're not making an actual capture of the site the same way the photogrammetry does. And do we need authorizations? Yes, sometimes we do. When we do games, for example, I remember a game like The Division that was that happens in New York. Our teams had to have special authorization to go in the tunnels that are below Central Park, or like to go places where nobody goes, places. So they have fixers that they work with. They work with journalists and other people, and with the police and with the army sometimes. So yes, there are special authorizations sometimes, because representing the reality, the accessible reality, is kind of interesting. But what's more interesting is to show people what the places that they cannot access.
Let me just jump in there. For sites in Jerusalem or in Israel in general, and since photogrammetry, to capture these locations, you need to spend quite a bit of time. I mean, for scanning or capturing the Holy Sepulchre, we spent altogether 2 nights, something like 8 hours of 3 photographers just walking around, taking side steps, images. So obviously, when you spend that much time in a location, and when these locations do require filming permits, as some of the holy sites in Jerusalem do, then this thing is necessary. It all depends, obviously, if this is an open space, or if it's this space is a private space and belongs to someone, or is managed by someone. So obviously, this differs once you do get into photogrammetry, and if you not recreating the spaces as was done in Assassin's Creed, but if you want to capture it.
And also from my side, sorry, you can imagine how it's critical, to get to the places in a war context, for example, and to get all the authorization to be able to go on the field. So it's a very important part of our work, how we can organize, a mission in, I don't know, in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, how we organize the logistic, how we organize authorization from the authorities, and how we will be able, to collaborate with local specialists in order to scan these sites. And but we think that it's really important to do all this work, because otherwise a lot of people cannot see, this place. So it's something like very, very important for us to keep, doing this thing.
There was also a question about, do we only reproduce things like buildings that are still standing, or can we reproduce buildings that have completely disappeared? We reproduce buildings that have disappeared all the time. When you reproduce, when you have an entire game set during the wars of the Peloponnese in Greece, you reproduce everything. When you reproduce Egypt and Alexandria, you reproduce. When you reproduce the Italian Renaissance, lots of things were broken or disappeared. So yes, we recreate from scratch based on whatever we have.
I also noticed a question with regards to AI. We are now working on a new project where we're using non-player characters, in which case these are AI-driven characters. So you're exchanging you're in a certain location that we created, but you're exchanging dialogue with an AI character. AI can prove very beneficial when it comes also to branching narratives, and to understand how to branch narratives and how to build, if you like, different methods of storytelling. And also AI can be used for natural voice processing. So if you want to be able in VR to talk to your characters and to be able to have an exchange. So these are the use cases for AI that I have come across.
I see a question from Pavel about the Oculus. If you mean the Oculus Quest, we actually do have a version of Notre Dame VR that works on the Quest. We optimized it for the Quest, but when we submitted it to Oculus, at that time they only wanted the Rift version, so the version that's linked to a PC. So we have to continue talking to them and convince them that they should also make the Quest version accessible, because it's so much easier to use for everyone.
And for game developers in general, I think I should point out that Oculus is one of the hardest organizations to deal with when it comes to publishing. They curate their content, and it's much a lengthier process to publish your content on Oculus Store than on Steam and Vive.
And just from my side, Arthur, please.
No, I just saw a question with regards to whether it is available on the Quest. So we have a number of versions, as I mentioned, for the Holy City. The one that is 1 hour long, that is full play, you would need to connect your Quest with the link cable to your computer in order to play it. At the moment, it hasn't been optimized for the full play. However, the group experiences and group tours are made for, have been optimized and are made for the Quest. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. Just to reply to a question about the work with a researcher, I think it's really important for us. You know, we have a lot of collaboration with many universities all over the world, from French university to university from Switzerland, US, and it's important to reconnect, you know, the data, the raw data we are producing on the field to the researcher, because the researcher are producing the knowledge from this raw data. So it's very important to be able to share, you know, all this accurate information in order to transform this information into knowledge about our past. So that's why, and we hope also in the future to collaborate with researchers also in Israel, on archaeological sites that have been already scanned, and we can, you know, even remotely reprocess the data and have a more accurate representation of it. So it's interesting also this time of COVID, because a lot of researchers, they cannot go to the field anymore. So they have only, you know, this kind of 3D matter, 3D data to keep working on this side. So I think it's also a kind of future for some of research in archaeology.
It circles back, and both Iconem and Ubisoft are part of the Time Machine project, which is a project led by EPFL, the engineering school in Switzerland. And the idea is to digitalize the history of Europe and Israel. And there are local time machines. So the idea is they digitalize all the archives. And they want to make this huge database that's going to be available for everyone to use, and that's going to include pictures and text with recognition of the characters, so they're using AI to read all manuscripts, for example. And all the time machines can be connected. And there are time machines in lots of different countries, like in Germany and in Switzerland, in Italy, in France. And there's also a time machine in Jerusalem, and every time we have meetings for the time machine, we have historians from all these people from all these places, and both Iconem or Ubisoft, we are also showing how we use the work of the researcher, and we can bring them with, like, we can add the images so that the visualization of their work is more accessible. So we can magnify the work of the researcher and make it more accessible to everyone, both researcher and the larger public. Other municipalities, yes, there are plenty of monuments and cities who are interested in these techniques. And so we're actually, we have contacts with the public institutions or cities who want to use virtual reality and also augmented reality, because augmented reality also has another benefit. It's a way to magnify a building that exists. You can add things to the building and tell a different story. So people are working around maybe with their phone and they can scan things and they can have explanation. They can even have games, but that are using the actual building as it is. So yes, we do have that. We had an escape game, for example, at the Invalides in Paris. So it's a 90-minute escape game that you can do with your family, and inside the museum. We have another one coming up also just in the city of Paris. We're using any monument outside in Paris.
And in Israel, there's a company called Simplex that has been working and doing 3D mapping, aerial 3D mapping, and they have worked with the police and with a number of Israeli government offices, and there are a lot of case studies and use cases, I'm sorry, for capturing cities and using those models for various government and security use cases. And do we know any technologies, any municipalities? So the project of the Holy City was supported by the Jerusalem Development Authority. So this was their contribution and their help in supporting our project and using this technology. I'd like to hope and see that other cities in Israel would do the same. This is an ancient land, and there's a lot of fascinating places to visit, and I hope more institutions and more cities will follow on.
There's a question from Ari, I think, but I don't really understand the question. How do you inject information to the 3D model? If I understand the question, we don't inject anything. We're using sketches or pictures or anything that we have at our disposal, and we recreate completely. Sometimes we can use a little bit of photogrammetry, but not with thousands of pictures, maybe just with hundreds of pictures to have a light model, and that can help us for landscape, for example. I think we used it for the pyramids and the mountains around the pyramid.
Okay, thank you everyone. I think it's the end of our webinar. And thank you Deborah, Yves, Nimrod, Etienne, Guy and Jean-Jacques also to have been there. And thank you to all the participants. And thank you, have a good evening. And this webinar will be available on Facebook Live and on our page, of course, in replay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Thank you.